Hello, friends. Here I am. Feels like a little while since I've had a chance to make a lecture. And so I actually, strange as it sounds, I really enjoy doing this. It's an opportunity to talk, and I imagine y'all out there and everything. So anyway, I'm glad to be here with you now. Um, Okay, well, what I thought we'd talk about now is Frederick Douglass. I finished reading and responding to your comments on him, and I think by and large, folks are on track. Let me say some things to sort of um, basically give you some additional points to think about, and to maybe push out your analysis just a little bit further in some other areas. And also, just to start off here, give a little bit of historical context. Certainly, we have a presentation that y'all are watching that's doing just that. But let me build on all that a little bit now. We're sort of in Romanticism still, but this is an important subset of Romanticism. These are slave narratives by both Frederick Douglass and Harriet Jacobs. Yes, there is a lot of romanticism in here. It's about the way we saw in Emerson, this desire, we're going to take possession of ourselves. You know, we have all these bonds of conformity limiting us and restricting us. And so we're going to learn how to sort of bust out of those chains of conformity and expectations that are imposed on us from without. We're going to get to know ourselves from within. We're going to take possession of ourselves, and we're going to map out the course of our own lives, independent from other forces that would try to tell us they know better for us than we do. Okay? Well, doesn't that sound a little bit like Frederick Douglass here? You know, he's saying, well, guess what? The forces of conformity, if you're a slave, I don't think I even need to get into it because I think you kind of get where I'm going with this. Yeah, you better believe it that Douglass did not have possession of himself as a slave. Talk about the forces of conformity that were on him. I'm your master, you're my slave, and you are going to be exactly what I paid for you to be. And that's it. That's it. I think you get it. So, but just pause a moment and just think about that, you know, those forces and pressures on him that owned every fiber of his being as guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States of America and the laws of Maryland, where Douglass lived at this time, okay? He had literally no rights even to his own person. So imagine that process of self-reliance that Douglass is engaging in so he can take possession, not of anyone else, not, you know, to be a self-made man, this, that, and the other, but simply just to take possession of his own life. Wow. And this isn't to say that Emerson and Douglass are completely different from one another. No. Douglass, in fact, there's been some recent scholarship on this. A man named Len Gudgeon, for example, has talked about this, that Douglass learned, after Douglass escaped from slavery, but he hadn't written his book yet, he was on abolitionist platforms, you know, giving lectures with Emerson. So he learned from Emerson's concept of self-reliance, and that helped him shape his own narrative, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, 1845. In 1845, when he wrote this, of course, that is right in the heyday of transcendentalism. So I guess what I'm saying is slave narratives, like Douglass, like Jacobs, you know, they're very different from romantics like Emerson, but in a lot of ways they're very, very similar, very, very similar. As one of you already mentioned, that there seems to be some connection between Douglass and Franklin. And yes, there is some element of, you know, becoming a self-made man that you see in this book. And so, yes, Douglass was influenced by Benjamin Franklin. But again, his desire for freedom is so much more fundamental than even Franklin and Emerson. Okay, so, all right, well, so let me get into the strategy of what slave narratives, what writers of slave narratives, what they're after. They're not simply about, okay, this is the story how I took possession of myself. It's more than that. They were writing these narratives, these stories of their lives after they had escaped from slavery. Everything I'm saying, by the way, now applies to Douglass and to Harriet Jacobs, okay? After they escape from slavery, they make their way to the North and they make friends with abolitionists, and they are trying to use their story to help persuade people in the North that slavery is evil and we need to get off our butts and do everything in our power to put a stop to it. I'll repeat it because it's that important and it's that straightforward, okay? Slaves are writing their narratives to convince Americans in the North that slavery is evil and they need to do everything in their power to put an end to it. That's it, okay? So Douglass, when he originally wrote this story, it was to reach people in the North, the free states, in the years, this came out in 1845. This is 20 years before the end of the Civil War. I mean, slavery was alive and well. It was still expanding. It was growing all over the United States still. Slavery is alive and well, and he's trying to reach out to people in the free states to try to persuade them, oh, don't just simply go about your business living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and forgetting about that larger world around you. Get your head up out of the sand, take a look around, and realize that slavery is pure evil, and you might want to put forth some effort to put a stop to it, okay? It's really that straightforward. Okay, so the question then is, how is Douglass and Jacobs trying to break through my apathy? Okay, imagine I'm your typical American. Look, I've got kids to feed. I've got a job to go to. I got work to do. I got bills to pay. Look, I got more than enough on my plate, folks. Don't give me anything else to worry about, all right? Douglass knew that's his audience. So how's he going to bust through my apathy and make me care? Make me, everyday John Q. Public American, make me care. So I'm going to drop everything. All right, hang on. I just realized this is my grandfather's fishing pole. All right, let's pretend I'm fishing for a living. All right, put down this fishing pole. Put this down. Say, all right, okay, that can wait. I need to go do something to join the abolition movement. Lots of luck, right? Douglass knew how hard it's going to be. So again, this narrative is simply to try to persuade people like me to get involved, all right? So let me tell you how both Douglass and Jacobs are working to put an end to slavery and reach out to us, grab us by our hearts and our minds. One of the ways, and you probably noticed this already, one strategy Douglass is taking here is to prove or to convince to someone like me anyway that slavery is utterly un-American. He knows that's a fundamental part of my identity. I am an American, all right? I value my forefathers that fought and died for my freedom. I love the life I get to live here. I'm very grateful for the life I have in the United States of America. Okay, et cetera, et cetera. We celebrate the 4th of July and, Thanksgiving and all these other American things. That's who I am, right? Okay, so he knows that's something his readers all share in common, that we have this identity as Americans. So he's using that then to prove to me, it's just like, look, Richardson, you think you're an American, great, and you are. Well, let me show you something that's happening in your own backyard. I'm pointing at my backyard here. Yeah, don't look too carefully. I need to cut the grass. Something going on in your own backyard that is utterly and disgustingly un-American, and that's slavery, okay? Think about the things that we care about as Americans, and those of us who are Americans. I know not everyone in the class is an American. What are the things that Americans care about? We care about our freedom. We're willing to fight and die for our freedom. As it says in the Declaration of Independence, that I'm endowed by my Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's in the Declaration of Independence, signed July 4th, 1776. And so Douglass is saying, okay, so you know what you value as an American? Then why is it that certain human beings in this country are denied by the laws and even the Constitution of America, denied those certain inalienable rights? It's wrong. It's fundamentally un-American. There are seeds of real un-Americanness planted in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution both, which says that people have a right to own slaves. Douglass is saying, you can't have it both ways, folks. You can't. If you're honest with yourself and you say that you're grateful for everything America is doing for you, but you can look at what's happening to the slaves and think that's fine, you're more or less a hypocrite. Douglass is too diplomatic to come out and say that, but you don't have to read between the lines too much to see that's kind of what he's saying. Okay, so the flip side of that then is that for someone like Douglass, who is fighting and willing to die for his freedom, that he's not just some criminal. I mean, that would have been the attitude towards slaves that were trying to escape, certainly in the South. A slave is trying to escape, that's an ungrateful slave, and he's a criminal. He needs to be locked up, chained up, sent back to his master, spend a little time in jail, and he needs to be whipped, okay? That would have been the attitude towards an escaping slave. Douglass is saying, no. Let's see this from a broader perspective. That broader perspective is, okay, who else is willing to fight and die for their freedom? Yeah, George Washington, Patrick Henry, Benjamin Franklin, whom we've already, these founding fathers, so-called, right? That's who else. So that's how Douglass is trying to reach our hearts and our minds, saying, look, I'm no different from you. You might look at me and think slave and criminal and whatever. No, I'm just like you. I value this fundamental American identity, which is I want to fight and struggle for my freedom. Not only that, I want you to help. I'm free, he's saying, but there are millions of people just like me still in bondage. And if you care about American freedoms, you will do everything in your power to set them free. There are a lot of people in the United States of America who are not free at all. Okay? So we need to make this promise that is America. It hadn't come true. It's a check that was written July 4th, 1776, and that check so far, it hasn't cleared the bank, right? If I can use a metaphor like that, okay? All right, well, let me show you what I mean. Look over on page 1209 in your book here. He even invokes one of the founding fathers here, Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry is the guy who famously said, y'all are going to recognize this, give me liberty or give me death. All right, everyone's heard of that. It stirs your heart. Give me liberty or give me death. I'm going to have my freedom or I'm going to die trying. No in between. All right, stirs our blood, doesn't it? Okay, well, now look what Douglass is doing with that. Look at the bottom of page 1209. This is chapter 10. In coming to a fixed determination to run away, we did more than Patrick Henry when he resolved upon liberty or death. With us, it was a doubtful liberty at most, and almost certain death if we failed. For my part, I should prefer death to hopeless bondage. Okay. Douglass deliberately does this again, hoping that these words will resonate with our hearts. Again, his readers are free white people in the North. He wants to stir our hearts so we will help him, okay, and the other slaves still in bondage. Okay, another thing that he does, he can be pretty confident also that many of his, probably most of his readers are Christian, at least nominally so. And so this is why, maybe you noticed, why Douglass spends a lot of time talking about Christian slaveholders. And, does this mean that Douglass is anti-Christian? Here you have all these people professing to be Christians, and look at the horrific treatment they're engaged in here. Not exactly. And we've seen this strategy before. Remember, way back to the beginning of the semester, man, back in January, feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? Man, when we were meeting happily in the classroom there, man, a lot's changed, right? But remember when we were talking about Casas and talking about the Christian Spaniards and calling them out. And as we saw, he wasn't against Christianity. He himself was a priest when he's writing this. He's calling out people who are pretending to be Christians, and then going out and slaughtering many, many native peoples, saying, sorry, folks, that ain't Christian. And he's trying to lay hold of our moral conscience to bring that up to the fore. So if we're going to say we're Christians, our behavior is going to demonstrate that we are, okay? So Douglass is doing something very similar here. He calls out the Christian slaveholders over and over again. Look over on page 1207. This is just before where we left off. Okay, one of the things that he does after he learns how to read, he's setting up a Sunday school. And so he's teaching the other slaves about Christianity, but also giving them basic education. He's teaching them how to read. And look at what happens here. This is towards the bottom of 1207. It was necessary to keep our religious masters, you can hear the irony just dripping, at St. Michael's unacquainted with the fact that instead of spending the Sabbath in wrestling, boxing, and drinking whiskey, so Christians would have their slaves, they're just spending their day off, just off getting drunk. They'd rather them do that than spend time at church and in Sunday school. Douglass is saying, do you see the hypocrisy in this, right? Christians who don't want their slaves to get the basics of Christianity. Doesn't sound like Christianity to me. If anything, that sounds like something Satan would do to block certain people from learning about the Word of God, right? Okay, we were trying to learn how to read the will of God, right, in the Bible. For they had much rather see us engaged in these degrading sports than to see us behaving like intellectual, moral, and accountable beings, which is what a church school is supposed to do. My blood boils as I think of the bloody manner in which Misters Wright, Fairbanks, and Garrison West, both class leaders, in connection with many others, rushed in upon us with sticks and stones and broke up our virtuous little Sabbath school at St. Michael's, all calling themselves Christians, humble followers of the Lord Jesus Christ. Saying that's hypocrisy, folks. And he's trying to say, look, okay, just as he's trying to reach out to people who identify as Americans, he's trying to reach out to readers who identify as Christians, saying, this is happening in the United States of America. People pretending to be Christians who are trying to prevent these people, slaves, right, from learning and internalizing the Word of God. Okay, that's hypocrisy. It's anti-Christian. And so again, if you, dear reader, Douglas is saying, if you, dear reader, care about your own desire to live a Christian life, your own desire to make sure others are getting good Christian treatment, okay? If you care about these things, then you'll be utterly disgusted by what some people are doing in the name of your religion. And again, Douglas is thinking if he can make folks angry enough, then they'll, yeah, here's my prop here. They'll put their fishing pole down. Yeah, this is a classic. This is probably from the 40s here. Put their fishing pole down, get off their lazy butts, and go join the abolitionist movement. Okay, so, yeah. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop here. This is the end of part 1, and I'll be getting into part 2 next. So, okay, stay tuned.